Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be talking about The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. I really hope I'm saying that right. I looked up how to say her name and that is what came up, so that's what I'm going to go with. But this book has been talked about everywhere. It has an extremely high rating on Goodreads, like a 4.49, I think. My friend reached out to me and was like, do you want to buddy read this book? It's definitely pretty large. It's almost 600 pages long. Came out in 2023. Tananarive Due is like a horror scholar as well as a horror author. I believe she's been writing since the 90s. You can see her featured on Eli Roth's History of Horror. If you haven't watched that, I highly recommend it. It's fantastic. But she's also a college professor. I believe she teaches a class actually named after Jordan Peele's film Get Out. I think it's called like Inside the Sunken Place or something like that. So really cool. Very excited to read her first book. Again, I can't believe I had never read anything by her before just because she is so well known and kind of everywhere. But yeah, so I picked up The Reformatory. It's one of like the hottest books right now. I'm going to read the back of, or I'm going to read the inside flap, I guess, to give you guys the premise. And we're going to dive into this review. So it says, Gracetown, Florida, June 1950. 12-year-old Robbie Stevens Jr. is sentenced to 6 months at the Gracetown School for Boys for kicking the son of the largest landowner in town in defense of his older sister, Gloria. So begins Robbie's journey further into the terrors of the Jim Crow South and the very real horror of the school they call the Reformatory. Robbie has a talent for seeing ghosts, or hates. But what was once a comfort to him after the loss of his mother has become a window into the truth of what happens at the Reformatory. Boys forced to work to remediate their so-called crimes have gone missing. But the hates Robbie sees hint at worse things. Through his friends Redbone and Blue, Robbie is learning not just the rules, but how to survive. Meanwhile, Gloria is rallying every family member and connection in Florida to find a way to get Robbie out before it's too late. The Reformatory is a haunting work of historical fiction written as only American Book Award-winning author Tananarive Due could, by piecing together the life of the relative her family never spoke of and bringing his tragedy and those of so many others at the infamous Dozier School for Boys to light in this riveting novel. Okay. So I want to do this review kind of in pieces because I have a lot of things to say about this book, and it's a little bit all over the place. So the first thing I want to talk about is a lot of the stuff in this book is based on real events that have been, again, reformulated into a historical fiction novel. Robbie Stevens was a real person. This does not necessarily chronicle the life that he had, but it is based on the experiences that the real Robbie Stevens had in the 1950s, I want to say. It might have been the 1930s. At the Dozier School. Gloria is inspired heavily by Tananarive Due's mother. And then Robbie obviously is her like great uncle, I think. So they are not actually siblings in real life. And then a lot of characters in this novel are real historical figures that did fight and work for like the NAACP during the Jim Crow like segregation of the South. A lot of this is based off, a lot of the horror in this novel can be kind of divided into two different categories. The ghosts that Robbie is dealing with and kind of how like the ghosts operate and act and creating this almost like supernatural element to the story. And then obviously the like actual real historical horrors that did happen in the Jim Crow South. So when you look at it from that way, the Jim Crow South horrors that actually did happen in real life, in my opinion, are what make this book truly terrifying. The absolute racism and the horrific treatment of the boys at this school and just honestly any person of color in this book for the most part. That is where the real horror of this book is. The actual ghost concepts of this story are not really scary at all. I wouldn't consider them horror. They're more of this kind of just kind of very eloquent way to express the horrors of the past and all of the racism that took place towards these ghosts in their lives and just how it kind of continues and lingers on into Robbie's time in the 1950s. So that actual part, yes, it's supernatural, but it's not what makes the book scary. The issue with that is I almost wish this was two separate books. I really wish that we had just a focus on kind of the historical fiction. I almost wish we had a novel that just focused on the horrors of the Jim Crow South, especially around, what is it, I think Marianna, Florida. Again, that was a real place. Gracetown is not, but Marianna, Florida is. I think that would have worked a little bit better because I felt at times looking at the school that Robbie is in, and then looking at kind of Gloria's storyline, which takes place primarily trying to fight to get Robbie out of the reformatory, there was just a huge disconnect. It felt like two separate stories, two separate struggles, where a lot of the horrors that Gloria was facing, again, was rooted in reality, and a lot of the horrors that Robbie was facing was trying to like make this scary atmosphere with these ghosts, but again, kind of paled in comparison to the horrors that happened outside of the supernatural world. And obviously you do have the warden, who's a very, very, very scary figure, and he commits a horrible, like, slew of atrocities, and his character is based on a lot of different people that did exist in real life and did operate in similar ways, but not necessarily based on one sole figure. He's a very, very terrifying person. However, I just felt like the reformatory was one kind of story, and it just didn't quite work alongside these real life horrors. Like, I wasn't invested in the scariness of the ghosts because I was so invested in the scariness of things that actually happened in this country's history. And so I kind of wish that we had separated the two, because I also felt like, again, there was this big disconnect where the Robbie chapters were so fast paced and they kept you so much like on the edge of your seat, and you were so invested in like, how is he going to escape? What is going on with these ghosts? What did we find out about the warden? Versus Gloria's chapters, which were very respectfully written, and took more of a back seat on like the suspense and the action to really lay out what was happening during that time period. And I just kind of wish that we had this large separation, because one side was really, really heavy and really, really important to talk about, but then the other side kind of felt really just jam-packed and action movie and just like atmospheric, and there was just a very large tonal shift every time I was switching between the perspectives of Gloria versus Robbie. So I definitely had an issue with that. I also have to get really nitpicky here, because I really enjoyed Due's writing style. I really liked how this is a 600-page book, but it didn't feel like it was 600 pages. I was really able to just like keep reading and kept wanting more, and her pacing was really, really top-notch, especially with those Robbie chapters. And once you kind of understand what's going on exactly with the warden and exactly with like Blue and Redbone and Robbie, like you just want to understand the full mystery and really get to the end. But I just felt like there was a lot of kind of plot holes and a lot of just things happening with characters to continue to push the plot in the direction that she wanted. And all of the characters felt very, very, very static to me. Gloria, primarily, I did not like Gloria as a character. I thought that from the very beginning, she had this issue in which she was told to kind of be silent and let the adults handle the matter, and she would kind of insert herself and say things that she shouldn't have said that would then create a situation that would go awry. And it happened time and time and time and time and time and time and time again. And she never really learned from her mistake. She kind of kept making the same mistake over and over and over and over. And I just kind of found her to be really, really rude and unfortunately unlikable because of that. Especially when it came to Miss Anne, the character of Miss Anne. Miss Anne, I felt like, was portrayed as somebody who was very much caring and helping Gloria, and she just kind of took advantage of Miss Anne and was extremely rude to her. I know that Miss Anne like offers to give her $250 at one point, and that's $250 in 1950, so I don't even know what the money conversion would be now, but that's a large amount of money. And then when Gloria finds out that she doesn't necessarily need it for what she told Miss Anne, she like still kind of demands it and feels entitled to it. And I thought she was very, very rude to Miss Anne. And that was one of the only characters that when Gloria was kind of rude and like spoke her mind and was very matter of fact with what she wanted, Miss Anne was the only character that I felt like didn't deserve to be on the other end of kind of Gloria's disdain. Like Gloria had a lot of reasons to dislike a lot of people in Gracetown, and I kind of like supported how she thought about those people in a lot of instances, but I felt like Miss Anne got like the harshest treatment from Gloria and was probably like the nicest person to her. So I definitely felt like Gloria just was this very, very static character who really needed to kind of mature a little bit, and kind of, and even her father kind of hints at this, where when her father leaves her, she's still like a younger teenager, the same with when her mom dies. But I feel like the story is positioning her to basically grow up and become this like adult figure. And it's alluded to throughout the entire novel, but she never quite is shown to get there, to finally be able to be that person who can really take care and like oversee of Robbie. And then we get to actually like Robbie and Redbone and Blue. I just had a hard time understanding their relationship. A lot of their friendship is based on this concept of almost blind loyalty because of common situations. And I just don't understand Robbie and Redbone's continued loyalty to Blue, where Blue continues to be extremely self-serving and not benefit them at all, especially with Redbone. And I know that Redbone, his whole story arc is primarily actually inspired by what actually happened to the real Robbie Stevens. So that is even more tragic. And when you know that, and you find that out in the afterword of the author's note, when you know that, like, it does really make his storyline really, really tragic. And I loved Redbone. He was my favorite character. And I kind of loved how he really like elevated Robbie and really believed in Blue, but I just didn't understand Blue and Redbone's continued loyalty. Sorry, I didn't understand Robbie and Redbone's continued loyalty to Blue, because I just never felt that Blue earned it. And just time and time and time again, Blue really blames Robbie and Redbone for Blue's own actions, and things not going the way that they wanted them to go. And at the end, like, just nobody grows and nobody learns from any of those interactions, in my personal opinion. I also felt there were like a little bit of like plot holes, like the scene where Robbie and Redbone and another kid whose name I don't remember at this time get locked in the freezer, and then you find out like who locked them in and like how all of that goes down. That kid who was with Redbone and Robbie just never really appears again, and if I was that kid, I would have so many questions about what happened, and that just kind of gets like completely swept under the rug. So I was very, very confused about that. I also felt that Due really started to kind of get really repetitive in her way of analyzing Robbie's reactions to fear. This might be a little like TMI, but I've never read a character who pees in fear so much. And like, one time I can understand, and two maybe, but I'm pretty sure it happens 4, maybe even 5 times in this novel. And it just felt like I needed something else. Like, I understand he's a 12-year-old boy and this is horrible, horrible circumstances, but I just needed to stop reading about this kid peeing his pants, because it really did get weird and repetitive by that point. Oh, I know, this sounds like I have so many critiques of this book, because I unfortunately do. My only other big critique with this, and this one is very minor, but it's just because it was something that I wish had been expanded upon. The warden here, Haddock, he is absolutely the most terrifying character in this entire novel, and he is, for the most part, very, very well fleshed out. You really get a great idea of who he is in the present. However, a lot of who he is very dependent on who he was in the past. And I was a little annoyed to find out that his backstory was very, 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 very similar to Patrick Hochstetter's backstory, almost to like a T. If you've ever read Stephen King's It. Also characters who were like growing up in like the 1950s. So it's all kind of synonymous time period, I would say. I guess Haddock's much older and it's 1950, but it's the same kind of general vibe. And we start to get like slight insight into it, but like Stephen King gives us chapters on understanding Patrick Hochstetter. And I needed more on Haddock's backstory. I really wanted, if we were going to talk and touch on who he was as a child, I really wanted more than just a couple sentences, because I was able to fill in the blanks a lot of times. But I think what makes Patrick Hochstetter such a truly terrifying character, in my opinion, the scariest character Stephen King has ever written, is the in-depth background that you get on who he is. I would have loved to see more on who Haddock is, and not just kind of these like brief paragraphs alluding to his past, especially with the fire from, I think, 1920. Just because I would like more in this is the true villain of this story. This is why he's scary. This is the background information, you know? And it's kind of understood that, like, maybe Robbie has the ability to kind of read into more than is being said aloud. But I really think I would have liked to just have this character, as awful as it would have been to read about, just more fleshed out to really solidify just how truly evil this man was. He does get a lot of, like, show don't tell moments that I really, really appreciated to show how evil he was. But if we're going to have a very, 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 very similar backstory to Patrick Hockstetter, I really want that attention to detail to kind of just nail him down as this horrific villain. I needed more backstory on him, and I think it would have really elevated that character a lot. So I gave this a 3 stars. I think to me it's more of a 2.5, and it's because I'm really, really torn. I think it's too long. I think this book would have benefited from being truncated pretty significantly. And again, I feel like a lot of those Gloria chapters could have been completely removed entirely and put into their own separate novel about her and just the structure of the court system in the Jim Crow South, because it really kind of killed the pacing for a lot of the storyline with Robbie that I did find to be more... it kept my attention more just because it was showing the similar horrors that Gloria was fighting against in her side of the story, but it just did so in a way that was way more show don't tell. And it had a really good balance of supernatural with the horrors of reality that in Gloria's I felt just became very, very much tell don't show, if that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed her writing. I would definitely give her another chance. But I just really felt that this book was just kind of it was too many concepts that she was trying to put into one book. And I feel like had this been chopped down to maybe 200 pages, we really just focused on the Reformatory, we would get some of those, like, amazing atmospheric moments. Like, the very first time Robbie sees the ghost in the kitchen, that was such a chilling scene. It was so chilling when he turns around and Blue is just like, oh yeah, the kid with the knife. Chilling. Atmospheric. Amazing. I loved that scene. I really, really grasped onto how much I loved that scene. And I was hoping for more and more of that, especially when you have, like, Crutcher, when he discovers what's actually in the shed, or when Cleo and Redbone both go into the box. Like, there were these really, really chilling moments. Or when Robbie wakes up in the infirmary and he sees the ghost there. Like, these amazing atmospheric moments. But those were the moments that I was like, the writing in this is absolutely superb. And then I would get to some of the other, like, moments where I just kept looking back and being like, that just doesn't make sense. Like, the kid in the freezer, I don't understand where he went. I don't understand why she started kind of putting in certain characters and they had, like, 3 chapters of FaceTime, then we never really saw them again. Like, when they go to the funeral, and I don't even remember this kid's name right now because he was only mentioned in, like, 2 chapters. When they go to the funeral and Robbie's playing the trumpet and there's the first trumpet player and he kind of has this, like, moment with Robbie where it's, like, really sweet and it's really sincere, but it was like, where was this character anywhere else? And another thing, just because I'm now just rambling, this entire story takes place over the course of a week, and I don't feel that the relationships and bonds that these characters are having would be formed over a week. In my mind, this story needed to be stretched out to about a month or 2 just to really understand everything that was going on, and I felt like those connections would have made way more sense. Especially the close bond that Robbie and Redbone had. To me, that felt like friends who were going through something for weeks together, not just a couple days before everything kind of went crazy. So yeah, I enjoyed a lot of the atmospheric moments. I enjoyed a lot of the concepts, and I really, really love how Due was able to take real life horrors and make that the absolute horror. Like, the ghosts, in my opinion, they're not scary, but I don't think they're meant to be. I think they're meant to be haunting memories of past horrors rooted in reality that we are then also facing as the main characters right there, seeing this is what's really horrific in life. And Robbie keeps referring to the Reformatory as the real life hell, and I think she does a really, really good job of carrying on that metaphor throughout the entire novel. but I did think that she bit off a little bit more than she could chew, and this would benefit from being 2 separate novels, because I would love to read something about like an actual historical fiction of the time period itself, and removing all of the supernatural and that whole storyline with like Wayman and Ms. Lottie and Gloria, and even when their house is kind of under attack and what they have to go through and how they have to hide and how they're living their real life fears as well, parallel to what Robbie is going through. I just felt like there was such a disconnect though, because there isn't anything really supernatural on that side of the story, and it did feel more like true historical fiction, whereas Robbie's storyline was a ghost story set through historical fiction as a lens. And so just the disconnect there I thought was a little hard. But the Robbie chapters for me were probably closer to a 4-star, and then the just pacing shifts and the fact that so many characters I felt like didn't have any kind of growth at all. Even Robbie becomes braver, but I feel like he's still very much rooted in his fear. So I don't know. And I don't love the ending, primarily because to me it didn't quite make sense. And if you've read this book, I'm only speaking about the dog scene and the use of the bloodhound. That to me just didn't make sense when I was understanding how ghosts operated. And I started like kind of finding like holes in that whole storyline. And again, I don't like reading about like the exploitation of dogs, and it's really not that bad. Like, dogs aren't really hurt in this. But there's just a line where where Robbie's like, I didn't think a dog could feel shame until I saw this. And I just, that like really broke my heart. And I just wish it could have been a different motive to get to that ending, because I don't think I understand it. And we're also introducing these concepts of possession, which I don't think had been introduced previously. So I don't know. There was a lot that went into it. I did really like the folklore and like the kind of hoodoo folklore that was used throughout this. I thought that was really, really cool. Mainly through the character of Boone, who's a terrible person, but he's a really good like vessel to put forward a lot of these like kind of hoodoo beliefs and how his grandmother influenced him and stuff. I was really interested in that storyline. So yeah, I don't know. It's just very much a middle of the road novel for me. So yeah, 3 stars. Had really like cool highlights, and I would definitely read something else from her. Again, I love watching her on History of Horror. I think she's really, really, really intelligent and has an amazing eye for the history of horror and how to utilize horror and basically balance out horrors of real life versus horrors of the imagination and the supernatural. And she has a really compelling prose. This novel just didn't quite work for me. I just thought it was too much in one storyline. And I just didn't love Gloria as a character, and I wanted more focus on Robbie and Redbone. And Redbone is such a good character, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. And if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah.